Again, just to fill up that little area a little bit. And scale it up a bit. Move one further back in here, and I'm going to scale it up a bit more as well. Alright, let's just grab a couple so we can move them around to this side. So we'll take this one, and this one. And we'll duplicate them one more time. Again, OBS hates it. I just want to take one more of these really large ones in the back and duplicate it. And we'll pull it forward. There we go. It just helps to fill up the base of those trees a bit so they don't look quite so empty. Alright. Well, again, let's do a save all so we don't lose our work. Right. So let's again just pull back, and again I'm doing this backwards because I can't turn my camera around because OBS really hates it. So I'm just going to pull my camera back here until we get within our pathway so we can get a better look at what's going on. I'll jump into full screen so we can see what we're looking at a bit better. So we have our pathway. Our camera will go through our main gate, which is there, along our path. Again, all of our trees will be animated in the wind until we get to our second terrace here. And then we're going to continue into our yard. Now we could, I had a suggestion yesterday. Some was suggested I should replace this tree with more of a dead tree so we could better see the building. That's a good suggestion, and it's something I'm thinking about doing. My reasoning for adding this tree though was I didn't actually want the building to be really seen until the camera gets more into the actual yard itself, and then we could bring the camera up to make more of an interesting reveal of the building. I sort of wanted it hidden from our camera as we came over our garden terrace, because remember, our camera will be sweeping around the side of our building. We're not going to be going through in the front. We're going to enter our building through here, through these side doors. I'm going to have to look at why the texture on that is dropping down. But let's just look around the outside of our yard a little bit more. We check everything is looking right, nothing looks odd. We raised up the yard a little bit so it wasn't quite so flat. We added some bushes and some trees just to fill it up a bit more. We added the marigolds to break up the green grass. I'm just going to jump out of full screen here. I think we're just about done with the yard now. I think we can probably start moving on to the interior of the building. Like I said, I do have to look at the shader that I'm using for the marigolds. It's looking a little bright, so I'll look at that after the stream. I have to do a rebuild on the lighting to check that though, and I don't do that on stream. I do want to work out why these textures on these urns are not loading in though. I know from max that's not loading the texture correctly, because if we look at the urn in max, we should be seeing our texture and it's not loading up. I'm going to have to look at why that is. I'm going to find the shader that Unreal created for that, and we'll look at it. I think it's... not that one. Or is it this one? And you see I don't have a normal map or anything assigned to this. I think what I'll do though is I'm going to add a constant just by holding the 1 key on the keyboard and clicking, and I'm going to pipe that into specular because this is stone. It's not going to be specular. Well, not unless it's white anyway. Just going to save that. You see our texture has popped back in again now. Now, that could again just have been something going on with Unreal being a bit weird. I can't see how not having a specular value would really cause that to be an issue. You never know. If it happens again, we'll have to look at what could be causing the texture to not load correctly. It could be something like it's set to streaming when it shouldn't be, something like that. Because you know how you can set textures up in your game engine to stream, so the game won't load them up until you get your camera close enough to the actual object for it to need to. It may be something to do with that. We'll just keep an eye on it and see if we need to change anything a bit later on. I do want to make sure I change the others though, so that they don't have a specular as well. So I'm just going to go through and add a constant value of 0 for our specular. Because that urn has a texture on the outside and a texture on the inside as well as the base. Hey Crosswind. No, it's not a displacement map. It's just a texture and a low, medium poly model basically. But it's if we jump into max, we can get a better look at it without all that fog going on. Yeah, it's basically a medium polygon model with a 2K texture. Most of the detail is in the texture, put it that way. This is just an urn I created. I created this about 12 months ago actually. Maybe longer, maybe 2 years ago. But I'm glad you like the model, the texture. And I just thought it's an interesting looking object for our entryway for our building before as our camera moves into our building. And I may end up using just the urn part inside the building here and there as well. Because it's an interesting looking object. with our ram's heads. Yeah, so 2K texture, but no displacement, no. Alright. So yeah, I'm just going to go through and make sure that we don't have any specular assigned to these textures. Thanks, Crosswind. I'm glad you like it. Again, I'm not using normal maps here either. Now, I may bring normal maps in for these urns. I'll see how we go. I don't know if it's really going to need a normal map though. I don't think these urns really need a normal map, to be honest. We can decide that later on anyway. When we come to do our cinematic, if we think it looks a bit weird, we can put a normal map on them. But I think once we get these textures sorted, I don't think there's really anything left for us to do for the environment. I think we might be done on the environment. We can start moving to the interior of the building, which would be good. It's taken so long to finish that environment. I mean, it's a big area. It's always going to take a long time to fill out an environment in an area that big, but yeah, it'd be nice to have a change from doing environment work for a little bit. Not that I'm complaining, that's what I do in my job. I do environments and buildings, and I know that's what I used to do when I worked for a game studio. I was an environment artist as well as a technical artist, so I'm not knocking it. Love doing environments, just changing it up occasionally is always good. Alright, that's our textures done. I'm just going to move them into our materials folder after I rename them. Just so I can stay nice and organised and don't get lost if I need to come back and find them. And this is new and bottom. So let's rename this one new and bottom underscore map for material. And this one is called inner bowl detail. Yeah, you should never leave your materials just called material underscore 116. It's not a good way to go. If you ever need to come back into your level and change something, you're never going to be able to find that material for the urn again if it's just called material 116. So yeah, always name things properly. It'll make your life much easier in the long run. I know it's a pain to do it initially, but in the long run it'll be better. Inner bowl detail. That goes for everything. If you let me just rename just before I forget what it's called. Bowl detail. If you're working, say, in Photoshop, and I work in Photoshop quite a bit, so I always generally use a lot of layers. And you know, when you create a new layer in Photoshop, it's just called layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Make sure you rename those as well for whatever it is that layer contains, because it makes coming back and working with your Photoshop file much easier as well. Particularly if you're giving your work to other people to work on. If you're in a team of people that work on a project and you give them, say, your level here and your materials are called material 86, material 39, they're not going to be happy. They don't know what they are. You might know what they are, but they're not going to, so make sure you name things properly, please, guys. It'll make everyone's working life much easier. This one's just called base, I think. Yep. I'm just going to call this one a pedestal base, actually, so I know exactly what it is. We'll just rename this one. New urn is fine, but I just want to put an underscore of matte for material. I just like to do that to keep everything consistent. And this one is in a bowl. Alright, I think we have all of our materials named now. We can move them into our materials folder. That one. No, I did forget one. And this is the urn ring. So new urn ring matte. Okay, let's start moving these now into our materials subfolder. And the same thing just with our textures. I want to move them into their own textures folder because I don't want it, when I start placing assets for the inside of the building, I don't want them in my assets folder here, so. And then just Unreal does this automatically. When you import your model, it puts the textures and the materials in the same folder that you import your model into by default. Okay, I think we're good. Alright, let's do a save all. Okay, I think we may be good to go. We can start working on the interior of the building now. I'll decide what about this tree a little bit later, whether I want to swap it out for just a dead looking tree, more like, where are we? Maybe more like these dead trees up here on the hill. Because that is an interesting tree. Let's jump up there and have a look. Again, these move in the wind, and it's an interesting shape for a tree, and it would look good at the front of the building. Particularly if we place a couple of them like we have here together. Because again, this is the same tree, just rotated and angled a little bit differently to make it look a bit more interesting. To create that grouping of two. So something like that down here in our building would look okay on the corner. Down here. But my initial thought was, yeah, I wanted to sort of hide the building as our camera came through and not really see the building properly until our camera had moved in past our pond until we got to around about here. Sort of like a slow reveal of our building, just for dramatic effect. And do remember though too, our camera, once it goes into our building and through our building, we'll be exiting by the back door here. So we'll get a good view of the building from here as well as that camera pulls out. We can tackle all of that when we come to do the cinematic part, when we start placing our cameras and doing all of that. Yeah, we can do that then. But our environment, I think, is pretty much done. I don't think there's anything else I need to do. Again, everything will be moving in the wind. I can't turn it on because of OBS, but actually let's do a playthrough here. I just want to play in a window. We'll have a look. OBS will hate it, but hey. And remember too, you can see the lighting needs to be rebuilt, so there'll be some plants that aren't going to be lit correctly. They're going to look a bit weird, a bit bright. But we do have all of our trees and things moving in the wind. Going to pull through here a little bit and stop the camera for a minute. Now again, I know it's probably lagging a little for you guys on stream because I'm watching OBS and it's dropped it back to about 21 frames instead of 30. But nothing slows down in Unreal, it's just OBS doing it. And keep moving forward. So our camera will be flying down about a pathway here. We'll probably cut to a few different camera angles and different parts of the landscape when we come to do our matinee cinematic in Unreal. But you can see everything does move in the wind, sways, all that sort of good stuff. Camera will come through here. We have our little pond over here in the corner. Again, I don't want to be that high. And again, our pond does actually, it does have ripples on it that move slightly. I don't know if you can see them in the reflection there. All of our grass moves and sways and does all that sort of good stuff. We have our main building. Our camera will not be entering through the front door here though. We'll be entering through the side door. Just here. So yeah, our camera will swing through our main doorway here to enter the building. But let's just keep looking around the outside of our environment. Make sure everything does look like it's moving correctly. Nothing looks like it's going nuts as far as the wind goes. Again too, I do have to knock back the fog. The fog is way too foggy at the moment, which is why when I get to an angle like, sort of like this, it looks a bit too fogged. Pardon me. Swing down the side of the building a little bit. Again, I'm just going to swing back this way to look at those monsterias we placed here in the corner to make sure they look okay. Alright, now I think our environment's pretty much done. Let's jump out of that. So now we can start tackling the interior of the building. Before we start tackling that though guys, I'm just going to take a break for a couple of minutes. I want to grab a fresh cup of coffee, because again this one's gone cold. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes. I'll leave you with my Be Right Back screen and some epic music playing in the background. And yeah, I'll be back in just a couple of minutes guys. Okay. So we've finished doing the environment for our building here. I think what we're going to tackle next is the interior of the building, because remember we are going to take our camera through the building in our cinematic. I'm going to start just by jumping quickly back into Max. We've finished working with the urn, so we can load up our Max building. We have a lot of the assets already in the building. I do actually, no, I don't want to save that. I do actually want to add some ivy growing on the outside of the building. We're going to have to tackle that too. That's the only thing really left for the exterior. We could do that now, we could do the interior. Whichever you guys might prefer to see, I don't really care one way or the other. I could show you how I grow the ivy on the building. Not this ivy. This ivy is going to be removed. I don't like that. I want to grow some new ivy. Or we can start filling in the interior of the building. We do have a lot of our assets already in the engine for the interior. There are a few that need to be brought in still though. Things like this main stairwell. I can angle it around. This main stairwell still has to be brought in. I still have to decide on a texture for these curtains because I really hate that texture from the original. Our rugs have to be brought in. Now these are rugs that will be sitting on the wall. And I'm going to use cloth animation, or Apex animation or whatever they're calling it now in Unreal to do the rugs on the wall, as well as these decorative banners that fly in the breeze. So I'm still going to bring those in because they have to be set up for cloth. As well as some floor sections still need to be brought in. And I haven't tackled this main chandelier yet. I want to redo that as well. But I don't want to work on these assets today, apart from maybe the ivy. But I think what we'll do is we'll jump back into Unreal and we'll look at the interior of the building. So let's move around to the front. Let's start inside of our building here. There's a few things we're going to have to do. Now, I haven't actually, in the original, these window frames were left open. They just have like a white paint texture, and that's fine. But I think they'd look much more interesting with a wooden texture to better match our columns. So let me just drag one of our column pieces in. Let's drag you in. So if we used a wood that better matched our columns as window frames, I think that could look really interesting. The wood color against the dark green of the window frame. And I haven't created those, so that's something I'm going to have to do. But let's start placing some of these column pieces in, I think. We do have a bit of an intersection happening there. Okay, that's part of the outside of the building. That shouldn't be a problem though. We can cover that up with column. So I'm just going to move this in. And again, these pieces are not going to be the correct size because we scaled our building up. So let's start by scaling our column up. We do have to remember too, we have to make some allowance because we're going to be placing a mesh as our tiled floor, as well as tiled wall panels. So hey Sniper Echo, good to see you. We're finally starting on the interior of the building. We finally finished the outside. Well, we finished the outside with the exception of the ivy growing on the outside of the building. That's the only thing left we've got to do. I think we'll start though with these columns. Just going to push that in. And I did design this originally so the column just met the side of the doorway there. Let's actually, I think that might be the wrong way around. I think it needs to go this way. Yeah. So that our column actually goes up against our door frame. Let's duplicate that. I'm going to mirror it. If I can remember where it is here. X, Y, Z, I always get confused. There we go, X. Just gonna pull these in a bit more. Now I have a bit of a gap there, but I'm going to be filling that with our wall panel. So. Just want to make sure my columns aren't sticking through the outside of my building. It looks like they may be a little bit, so I have to bring them forward. How's your done any more work on that level yet, Sniper Echo? Still working on it? That environment you've been creating? Unreal. Let's make sure that our columns now are not sticking through our wall. It looks like they are still a little bit on the side. You did some work today on it? On the rocks? Oh, cool. Yeah, I look forward to seeing that. I'm sure it's going to look cool. Just going to move that in. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. What I'm going to have to do is move it back out and pull it forward. I think that's the problem, they're just too far back. Yeah, no, I'm sure it's going to look really cool, particularly with that underground building section you're putting in. Sniper Echo says that Vue has some unreal rock generation features. It certainly does. That's why I love to use Vue to do my rocks. It creates rocks really well. There's I can't remember the name of the function. There's a function in Vue that you can use to create those lines and striation and all that sort of thing automatically for you. To create your rocks really quickly and easily in Vue. I can't remember the name of it. It's a noise function. I can't remember which one it's called right off the top of my head. But you use that to texture, not to texture the rock, but to create the geometry for the rock. So you can start with a sphere, add this texture. It's to do with creating like a meta blob, and this texture will then distort the rock into these really interesting looking shapes like the ones that I've got outside, just by using a sphere initially, and then you can generally export that. You can bake that shape down and then export that as a rock. So it's no longer a sphere, it's this mangled looking rock. And that's all just done with a function in Vue. But it has built-in rocks as well, of course. You know, in their object loader, you just load in a rock that way. You can use that as your base and then build on top of that. Another interesting thing to do is to use those standard rocks that come with the program and bring them into the what are they calling it? The paint tool in Vue, like the environmental paint tool. You bring them in as an object into that, then you paint rocks all on top of each other and use that grouping as your one rock. That's another interesting way that you can actually create a rock group formation from all these little rocks all stacked next to each other and on top of each other. Again, that's what I did with these ones here. Use that function I was talking about. These ones here actually use those little rocks all put on top of each other to make this one grouping of a big rock. So yeah, a few different ways you can do it in Vue, but you can just use Blender as well. Yeah, no, like I said, Vue does some amazing, that's why I use it a lot for the studio. It really does create some amazing looking environments. It's not, you know, it does rocks really well, it does landscapes really well, which is why again I used View to create the height map for our landscape we're using here in Unreal. The actual landscape itself was created in View and exported as a height map and imported into Unreal into their landscape tool. But no, it certainly creates some really amazing stuff in View. Just checking our urns here to make sure that texture is still showing up and hasn't disappeared like it did last time. No, it looks fine. Alright, let's grab these two columns and duplicate them. Pull them forward. Let's rotate them around, and I will turn on rotation snapping here so I can get a 180 degree rotation. And let's move them down to the other end. I will be doing more work with View. Once we've finished our Unreal level here, we'll be doing some stuff in View as well. No doubt, because I use that program quite a bit. Again, I'm just going to jump outside to make sure our columns aren't sticking through our wall. No, that looks alright. Sniper Echo, sorry, I just noticed your message. How many polygons are these rocks? Let's have a look. I think I put them in my terrain folder. I've got some stuff in here that shouldn't be in here. Okay, let's have a look at these rocks. They're too small. I really should have raised the size of them, but you can scale them up in View. Let's just pull in a bit here. This rock is 3,620 polys. Again, pay no attention to the moss growing on it because that's a function that I control. I can control how much moss is growing on the rock through a function in the shader. But yeah, this rock here is around 3,500 polys. I only use 3 different rocks and then I just copy them around. Again, this one's just under 4,000 polys, but that's from like a mesh that was originally about 1 million polys. The high-res mesh was about 1 million polys. And this one's 3,200. So yeah, I'm really only using 3 different rocks that I have that I've just brought in and moved around, rotated in different directions, so like push them up against each other. Like these 3 rocks are I think all the same rock, just rotated around in different directions. Yeah, so again, in null, because I know that you use null, just if you want to create like a 2 million poly rock and sculpt it up that way and create a low res version rock which is about 3,000 polys, just use null to bake the high poly to the low poly. I'm sure it'll do a good job. Again, I did use Substance Painter, but they both do the same thing. So yeah, and again, these 3 rocks, like I said, they're all the same rock. They've just been rotated differently and smashed up together to make an interesting looking grouping. So that's how we can get away with only using 3 rocks and making sure all of our rocks look unique and different just by pushing them into each other. See, there's one there, and one there. So there's like 3 different rocks, or pretty much the same rock just smashed together in different angles. And yeah, our moss is actually, like I said, controlled through a specific material. So we can either grow more moss on it or less moss, depending on what the look we're going for and wherever that rock is. Alright. I'm just going to get these columns placed first because that'll make it easier then for us to start placing our wall panels. So again, I'm going to copy one of these or duplicate it. And again, you see that I didn't create specific meshes for these. I'm just using the same one, and I've just pushed the part of the mesh I don't want into the wall to hide it. Because again, we're going to be placing, initially I had a wall panel up here, but I'm thinking maybe a painting on either end could look more interesting. We'll look at that a little bit later though. Let's get these columns done. And yeah, these columns are only two pieces, one at the front, one at the side. And I just use those to frame up these corners of the walls. So I'm just going to push that in until it doesn't disappear. Yeah, you do. There's a tutorial actually on YouTube that you can use to show you how to create a shader for the moss for the rock.